So you can take action. It is time for you to take action. You can help in hair discrimination in the workplace, schools, and pools, and join over 500,000 of other members of our community by sounding the Crown Act petition today. Currently, it is legal. Did you know? Currently, it is legal to discriminate against a person in the workplace, schools, and/or pools because of their natural or protective hairstyles in all states except 25. So we need you to join the movement by signing this petition today. Let's make it illegal. The link will be found in the chat for your convenience. Now that we've celebrated the progress we've seen recently, let's explore what is currently on the docket, trying to make the journey from bill to law. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Michaela E. Martinez, an ecologist, justice advocate, and director of environmental health at We Act for Environmental Justice. Dr. Martinez leads the Beauty Inside Out campaign, a powerful initiative that addresses the harmful effects of toxic chemicals in beauty products marketed towards women of color, especially those that promote Eurocentric beauty standards. Today, Dr. Martinez will be sharing critical insights on 5 key bills introduced in Congress that are aimed at closing major gaps in cosmetic safety. These bills target banning the most hazardous chemicals and mandating full fragrance ingredient disclosures, protecting communities of color and salon workers, and banning PFAS chemicals in cosmetics. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Martinez, who will guide us through legislation aimed to make our beauty industry safe for everyone.
Thank you so much for having me. Can everybody hear me? Yes, wonderful. Can you please advance the slide? Wonderful. So as mentioned, I am the Director of Environmental Health at We Act for Environmental Justice, where I run our Beauty Inside Out campaign. I also co-lead the National Beauty Justice Coalition with Dr. Astrid Williams, who you will see shortly. She'll be giving the next talk. But the Beauty Inside Out campaign is really set out to address the problem of toxic chemicals in beauty products that are marketed to people of color. And toxic chemicals in beauty products are harmful really in 2 ways. Toxic chemicals can cause physical harm to our bodies and harm our health, but also we see that racialized marketing of these products can cause social harm, psychological, and societal harms. And so We Act for Environmental Justice, we're working on the solution to this problem, and we're really doing this in 2 ways. So we're working from the top down and the bottom up. And what do I mean by that? By top down, I'm talking about legislation, and we'll dive a little bit more into some of the legislation that we're trying to have passed. And then bottom up, we're really trying to, with many other advocacy groups, foster a grassroots movement in the beauty justice area to really address this issue and push companies to innovate in terms of their product formulations, but then also hold companies to account for using racism and white supremacy in their marketing strategies. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned before, the big issue is that we're exposed to all of these harmful chemicals in our everyday products. And, this not only includes cosmetic products like makeup, but our personal care products. So our deodorants, lotions, soaps, things that we apply onto our bodies and are exposed to on a daily basis. And one of the important things to know is that the harmful chemicals that are in personal care products, they're not always listed on the label. And even if they are listed on the labels can be really difficult to read. I'm sure that all of you have had the experience of looking at the ingredients lists on, let's say, a body wash or deodorant of yours and being faced with a paragraph of chemicals, and it's hard to sift through what's what. And so we really need to have government oversight in terms of the regulation of what chemicals can go into our personal care products. And again, when it comes to beauty justice, it's not just about the harmful chemicals in our products to which everybody is exposed, but the fact that women and femme-identifying people of color carry a disproportionate burden of exposure. And this is for a couple reasons. Women of color tend to use more products, but then also some of the most notoriously toxic chemicals are found in products that are marketed to women of color. Next slide, please. And so just to give you a sense of some of these highly toxic products, where we also see racialized marketing and racist marketing, I just want to take a moment to talk about skin lightening products and hair straighteners. So skin lightening products and hair straighteners are two product types that are really steeped in Eurocentric and white supremacist beauty standards, because the whole notion of skin lightening products is that they're based in the notion that having lighter skin is preferable. And similarly, with hair straightening products, chemical hair relaxers, are marketed as a solution to having curly hair, as if having curly hair is a bad thing. And so these two products really exemplify the racism in the marketing and the Eurocentric beauty standards. But the other thing to know about these, both of these products have notoriously toxic chemicals in them. So skin lightening products oftentimes can contain mercury, and that's because mercury is highly effective at blocking melanin production in the skin, but mercury is also a neurotoxin that can cause mercury poisoning. And then recent research has found that the formaldehyde and formaldehyde releasers in hair straighteners can increase risk of hormone-sensitive cancers, such as uterine cancers. And formaldehyde is a known and established human carcinogen. Next slide, please. And so when it comes to protections and product safety from the government, so from the top down, people really want product safety to be imposed by the federal government. And it's really kind of enlightening to know that a large swath of Americans actually are under the belief that our products are tested for safe before they hit the shelves, which actually is not the case. So there was a 2022 study done by the Lake Research Partners, and what they did is they surveyed 1,200 registered voters across the country, and they were trying to get kind of a representative sample of registered voters, and they asked them about what their notions were in terms of food safety and consumer product safety. And what they found was that 49% of individuals thought that, or were under the impression that products were actually tested for safety before they hit our store shelves. And that is just not the case. And then once these survey respondents were told that actually personal care products are not tested for safety before they hit the store shelves, and they were asked, whether or not they support safety requirements, over 90% of survey respondents said yes, they would like to have safety requirements. Next slide, please. And so I'm actually going to skip a couple slides because I see that I'm at 10 minutes mark already. Next slide, please. Okay. Oh, okay, thank you. So one of the things to know when it comes to the safety and also just in general understanding the exposure that we get from personal care products, it can be really difficult to know, as we're putting personal care products on our bodies every day, what is going to be the biological health outcome, on the other end. Because what happens is we're applying these products and we have a dose of the chemicals in the products every time that we apply, and we don't necessarily have a sense of the concentration of toxic chemicals in the products, even though we might see it on the label. We don't know how much is in there. And then some subset of that dose that we put in our body gets, inside our body, and then can have biological effects and subsequent health outcomes. So if you imagine this process happening for every chemical that we're exposed to in our shampoo and our conditioner, our soap, our lotion, etc., and all the different ingredients, it can be really difficult to and intractable to trace this process for all of the different chemicals. And so we really need to have protective legislation to really keep known harmful chemicals out of our products. Next slide, please. And because I heard at the beginning of the talk today that some of your previous talks had mentioned endocrine disrupting chemicals. So all I'm going to say is that when it comes to chemicals of concern in personal care products, we see that endocrine disrupting chemicals as, a class of chemicals are quite common. And the EPA estimates that the US population is exposed to approximately 87,000 endocrine disrupting chemicals on a regular basis. And so, this is really shocking and something that we need to address. Next slide, please. Okay. So, how can we start to have an understanding of what chemicals are actually in the products that we use? Well, we as everyday consumers and as advocates, luckily we do have some publicly available tools at our disposal. And I recommend that everybody here either download the 𝐒𝐚𝐟𝐞𝐫 app onto your phone or actually install it in your web browser. But the 𝐒𝐚𝐟𝐞𝐫 app is really amazing because what it allows you to do is look at the ingredients in your personal care products, either those that are on your bathroom shelves already or as you're shopping, and look at the chemical composition and the classes of the chemicals that are in your products. And one thing that you'll see spending a little bit of time on 𝐒𝐚𝐟𝐞𝐫 is that known toxic chemicals are rampant in our personal care products. And toxic chemicals can be found in products of all types, expensive products, inexpensive products, known brand names, and also kind of more niche brands. And so I just wanted to pull up an example here of a Gucci Velvet Matte Lipstick from Sephora. And what we can see if we look at the chemicals in this product, in this lipstick, that we have one known toxin that's actually banned in the European Union. We have a few different other chemicals that are no, they are potentially toxic. So there's scientific evidence to show that they're potentially toxic. And then we also have multiple known allergens. So, what this shows us is that, on our store shelves, we can go out and buy today from Amazon or walk into a Sephora and get products that are highly harmful to our bodies. So now, can we go to the next slide, please? Now, what I wanted to talk about with my last 5 minutes or so is, well, what is the state of the legislation? Why is this happening? Why is it that we can go out and buy toxic products and apply them to our body? Well, the fact of the matter is that the United States, it has a lot of work to do when it comes to cosmetic safety legislation. And I want to thank one of our interns, 𝐿icia-Kelly, for putting together this timeline. But in 1938 was when the Food and Drug Administration made the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act. Now, it wasn't until December 2022, so just a couple years ago, that they updated this legislation with the Modernization of Cosmetics Act. So you could see there was about an 80-year lapse there between doing anything when it came to regulating cosmetics. And then in 2023, we introduced the Safer Beauty Bills package, which I'll talk about in a second. Next slide, please. Okay, So the Modernization of Cosmetics Act, like I mentioned, this is our new federal legislation. First time that we had an update in over 80 years. There are some really good things about it, but there are also some really bad things about it. When it comes to the good things, now companies are required to report serious adverse events to the FDA. So if someone dies from a cosmetic, is hospitalized, or if there are adverse birth conditions, then those have to be reported. Now that information won't necessarily be publicly available, but at least that there will be data coming into the FDA. And also now companies are going to have to report their fragrance and flavor ingredients to the FDA. So when you look at a cosmetic product or personal care product and you flip it over on the back and you look at the ingredients list and you see the word fragrance, actually hidden behind that one word fragrance can oftentimes be dozens to even hundreds of chemicals that are not disclosed on the label to the consumer, because companies have the right currently under our law to not disclose that information. But we know from research, product testing research, that these fragrance ingredients and flavor ingredients can be toxic depending on which ingredients are used. So now companies are having to disclose this information to the FDA, whereas before it was like the Wild West. Nobody knew what they were putting into the products. Now, there are some bad things when it comes to the Modernization of Cosmetics Act, which is why we need more protective legislation. So there are some really critical gaps. Like, as I said, if there are adverse events, they're not reported to the public. So the public still won't know, but the FDA will know. And also there's been some work done by the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics, where they've looked at the nitty-gritty details of how safety is defined within the new 𝐒𝐚𝐟𝐻 law, and it's actually weaker than our previous law. And so one of the reasons why it's weaker is because now when companies have to evaluate their products for whether or not they think they're safe, they're really only having to look at acute health outcomes, like does this product cause a rash or any immediate reaction or adverse effect. It doesn't account for any kind of safety considerations in the long term, such as chronic diseases or diseases that develop over time, like cancer, uterine fibroids, etc. And also one really important aspect is that 𝐒𝐚𝐟𝐻 actually preempts the states from putting in higher safety standards. So what that means is this new federal bill makes it so that states cannot go and put higher safety standards in their state laws. So that's really problematic as well. Next slide, please. So when it comes to advocacy efforts, I know we mentioned in the introduction to this talk that I was going to speak about federal advocacy, but given the landscape of federal advocacy around this issue, it's really important or this kind of status of the federal bills, it's really important to know that we actually have to work on this issue in a highly tiered way, in terms of international beauty justice bills, the federal beauty bill package, but then also state by state, because there are still some things, some powers that we have at the state level, particularly being able to ban individual chemicals, even though states don't have the power anymore to impose higher safety standards on companies. So at the international level, we've actually been working on amendments to the Minamata Convention on Mercury, which is an international treaty on mercury, in which we are trying to impose more protective language for addressing mercury in skin lighteners, which, as I mentioned, is a beauty justice issue. Now, at the federal level, we've been working on the Safer Beauty Bills package. And really, the Safer Beauty Bills package is doing four main things. It would ban the 11 most toxic chemicals from beauty and personal care products. It would also require that the fragrance ingredients are disclosed to the consumer. It would require to have more transparency on the supply chain side of things. So where are these chemicals coming from? We also, have a sense that many of the harmful chemicals, or at least a subset of the harmful chemicals in personal care products are also tied to other harmful product types, such as cleaning products and the fossil fuel industry. So we want to know more about where these chemicals are coming from. And then also the fourth part of the bill is really increasing resources for research on exposures in communities of color. Next slide, please, with my last 1 minute. And so here I'm just going to throw up, you can check out the Breast Cancer Prevention Partners website. They have a great breakdown of the Safer Beauty Bills package, and the Safer Beauty Bills package has been worked on collectively by a number of advocacy organizations. Next slide, please. And just to give you a highlight of some of the 11 hazardous chemicals that would be banned, they include some parabens, formaldehyde, which I mentioned as a problem in hair straighteners, and some formaldehyde releasers, and also mercury. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned before, with mercury and formaldehyde being in skin lighteners and chemical hair straighteners, respectively, we really need to have these chemicals banned on a federal level. We do have some international protection when it comes to mercury, but because of the lack of implementation of our international laws, we really also need to have a robust federal legislation to deal with these two chemicals. Next slide, please. And just to reiterate that this is a growing research area. So as we have new studies coming out, such as the recent study looking at the increased risk of uterine cancer with regular use of hair straighteners, we take these data and we use them. We use these statistics for advocacy, for pushing for these bills. But formaldehyde and formaldehyde releasers are just one chemical and chemical class, and we actually have a lot more chemicals that we need to address. Next slide. And so lastly, what I wanted to bring up, as I mentioned earlier, are there some things that we could do at the state level, such as individual chemical bans. So here, what this slide is showing is some of the states that have already taken action to ban or actively trying to ban formaldehyde. But what you can see is this is only a handful of states, and this is for only one chemical. So, we don't want to have to go state by state to all 50 states to try to get chemicals one by one or in classes banned. We really need to have a strengthening at our federal level. Next slide. And so lastly, I'm going to leave you with this, that when it comes to toxic beauty products that are marketed to women of color, these are things that are hidden in plain sight. On the right here, this is a photo of a beauty supply store that's just a few blocks away from my home in Harlem. And what you can see are shelves and shelves of skin lightening products. And then here on the left, this is a quick Amazon search that I did for chemical hair straighteners. And what you can see is that we have highly targeted marketing, not only to women of color, but also young girls. And so it's critically important that we have legislation in place to address not only the harmful formulation of these products, but also the harmful racist marketing of these products. Thank you so much. Oh, okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Martinez. This was so wonderful. This was a great conversation. And I want to open up the floor for any questions to our audience. This is your chance to delve into further legislation that we've just covered. So please don't hold back. Give us your questions. Post them in the chat. Let us know what questions you have so we can get them answered. I'd also like to invite you all to add to this momentum and your continued progress, your voice, because it can help push forward critical bills that ban harmful chemicals from our beauty products and ensure ingredient transparency and protect our communities most affected by toxic exposures. Breast Cancer Prevention Partners has made it easier for us to reach out to our congressional representative today and urge them to support the Safer Beauty Bill for all. Use the link that's in the chat to take action right now. So let's see what questions we have coming from the chat. All right, so I'll get started. So Dr. Martinez, what challenges or opposition do these bills currently face in Congress? And how can advocates like myself address these barriers to ensure their passage?
Yes, thank you for that. Well, these bills face a lot of lobbying. The cosmetics industry is a very large and very powerful and old industry. And so we have the voices of beauty justice advocates, which even though a very small group is a very strong group, but we're up against cosmetic industry lobbyists, the chemical lobbyists, the fossil fuel lobbies, because as I mentioned, it's not just the products themselves, but also the supply chain. So you have industry investment in terms of the chemical manufacturers, and because also these many chemicals are fossil fuel derived, you can also run it back to that big industry. And so, yeah, that's what we're up against. It's a really, really big challenge. But I also think that as consumers and citizens, and community members, not only can we talk to our local officials and such, but also giving momentum to this movement, as we have more open discussions about these issues and start demanding that we have truly non-toxic products, then the industry will have to follow because they're all about money. And so there are several ways that you can get involved, both in movement building and also helping push legislation.
Awesome, thank you. We got another question from the chat. And it says, do any of the bills listed, any of the active bills that are listed working to show any kind of percentages?
Thanks for that, Abigail. That's actually a really great idea. No, they don't actually, in terms of the percentage of the chemical that's in the product. I have not seen anything like that. That would be critically important when it comes to measuring health outcomes. When we're trying to understand the levels of exposure, we're having to do product testing. Right now we're trying to test products for formaldehyde because, if you have formaldehyde or formaldehyde releaser on a label, we don't know the actual concentration of that. And we do the same thing when it comes to mercury and skin lighteners. And it would be really nice to know the percentages. But another important thing is that when it comes to particularly the endocrine disrupting chemicals, it's quite complex because, with many toxicants, we often think about this relationship of, okay, as you increase your dose of exposure, you're going to increase your risk of the health outcome. But for these chemicals that actually mimic our hormones, particularly the estrogen mimics, and female reproductive hormone mimics, actually at very low doses, they can have huge effects. And that's because they're actually changing our patterns of how our DNA is expressed. So even knowing the percentage, it is not always going to tell us about the health outcome. And so that's one of the reasons that we really want to push for chemical bans.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you, Rosemary, for that question. How about this question? How might these proposed bills affect small and independent beauty brands, especially those that are owned by communities of color, in terms of compliance and cost?
Yeah, that's a really great question because, and so a really great resource to look online is the Non-Toxic Black Beauty Project, which is run out of Breast Cancer Prevention Partners. I'm sure you can put the link in the chat. But we've had some discussions. I'm on that advisory board. We've had some discussions with beauty brand CEOs. And with the smaller companies, they need more buying power when it comes to the non-toxic ingredients, because if the industry standard has been these toxic ingredients and supply chains that, are accustomed to, selling toxic ingredients at a rate that's like relatively affordable, then it becomes difficult for well-intentioned small businesses to deviate from what that industry standard is because of cost. And so that's why I think that projects like the Non-Toxic Black Beauty Project are so important, because they can actually bring together small businesses to work together to purchase non-toxic ingredients and have more buying power and help them with costs.
Awesome, thank you. And we have more questions, but unfortunately we've run out of time. I would love to share these questions with you and possibly get these answered, and we can share with our audience at a later time. But Dr. Martinez, I just want to say thank you so much for that insightful presentation and for taking time to answer all of our questions from our audience. Your dedication to this work is so inspiring and deeply appreciated. And I just want to say again, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.